Today we're joined by someone who knows what it means to push the limits both on the field and off the field. It's Ethan Bullemor. He's a proud Nudgee Old Boy. He's a professional NRL player and a powerful example of balancing sport with academic excellence and personal integrity. We'll talk about lessons that he's learned from his time at Nudgee, who he looks up to at the Manly Sea Eagles, which is his current team, and his secrets to succeeding under pressure. Ethan, I am so excited to talk with you today. Now, for those who are listening, I'm sitting next to a human Hulk. This guy looks like Superman. He's built like a train. I want to unpack a few things. Definitely, I want to talk about your career at the Manly Sea Eagles. You've been playing there for 4 seasons now. I want to talk about your time in the Nudgee First 15. And I also want to talk about your endeavours, off the sporting field as well, because I think it's really interesting and very inspiring. But mate, let's take it back to the start. Can you tell me a little bit about your parents? Like, who raised Ethan and where was home for you growing up?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And firstly, thanks for having me here, and thank you to Nudgee. Very excited to be on this and very excited to be back on campus. So for me, the journey started in a little town called Springshaw, which is nearby Emerald, inland of Rockhampton. So that's where I grew up. My dad was, for a long time, worked for Ergon Energy as a live linesman. So he was always on call, always working, pretty significant hours. And mum was a primary school teacher. As I grew up, Dad ended up taking a job out in the mines out there. Coal mines are pretty prevalent in that part of Queensland. So he did that from when I was probably about 12. And then, so I did my primary school in Springshaw, a town of about 900 people. So that was, I guess pretty quiet, but it was a great childhood. Something I'm very grateful for is the childhood I had. Grew up, with motorbikes and driving and, dirt roads and camping, all the fun stuff. So was very blessed, I guess, to have that upbringing. And then, on the journey to Nudgee, I did 2 years at Emerald State High. So that involved getting an hour and a half bus essentially every morning and afternoon to and from high school. And it was probably about that time of my life where, you start thinking about, I guess, where you want to go. Like, you're no longer just you're not a kid, by no means an adult either, but, you're starting to, I think, think about what's next. And for me at the time, footy was definitely a passion of me. So I should say rugby league was a passion of mine.
That's right. It wasn't rugby originally,
Yeah, it wasn't rugby union originally. So
mate, I love it. It's always interesting to hear stories of people from small town, particularly regional Queensland. It sounds like you came from a family that worked hard, of modest means, but it sounds like you've always had this drive to sort of push yourself and go outside of that small town.
Definitely. I think, my parents always probably wanted more for me as well, and they probably instilled that drive in me. And then I think I've tried to carry that forward, I suppose.
And encourage you to sport or for reading or for academics or...
Well, everything. Like I said, Dad was never... one who I guess did university studies or tertiary education, and he worked with his hands sort of his whole life really. From 16 he was working, and I think though he was always adamant. I guess like he knew that I had the capability to go to uni and to I guess further myself, and I think it was that he knew that I had that within myself that he pushed me to make the most of that. And Mum was a primary school teacher, as I said, so she always instilled in me, I guess, the importance of, study and, doing your homework and things like that. So they definitely, were a big driving force in my life. And when Nudgee popped up, it's funny, Dad said to me basically like, look, like, I don't think you realise like the opportunity you've got. Like you've really just got to like make the most of it, because this is so outside of our means of ever having an opportunity to come here, and you can really set your life up. And it stuck with me, and I don't think I ever took this school for granted, and to this day it's one of the highlights of my life.
Yeah, it's a pretty wonderful place. We're here on the college right now, and it's just a pleasure walking around and seeing familiar faces. The way the buildings have changed over time. Yet the ethos and the spirit of the college is clearly still here and stronger than ever. What was it like though? Were you always a big lad, and were you nervous coming to Nudgee as a boarder? Like was that something you were nervous about, or did you being an athlete and being a big lad, did you just sort of fit right in from the start?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll answer it in a couple parts, I guess. Firstly, I've always been quite large for my age. I had a couple big growth spurts early, so I believe it or not, I think I'm about 6'3" now. I don't think I've grown in height since I was 13 or so. So
wow, so you were plus
yes.
6 foot when you're at Nudgee.
Honestly, I think I'm only probably about 3 kilos heavier than I am when I finished school. So I was a big kid, so that always played in my favour in terms of rugby. But it's interesting what you touched on, I guess, about were you nervous coming into school? I don't think I was nervous, but if anything, there was probably a small feeling of like, do you belong here? Like I said, touching back on, I guess, coming from, humble means to, for me, I remember my first memory of Nudgee was I was probably about 12 years old down in Brisbane for a rugby league carnival. I remember driving past the big shiny gates and, you're looking in and it almost felt like, oh, geez, that must be, like how good would it be to go there? Like you never would have imagined that, 3-4 years later, I would have been there. So I suppose if anything, there was just like always a bit of a, feeling of, like I need to prove I belong here. I need to, repay the college for the faith they've shown in me. And I think that's something that definitely was a good thing for me because I think it pushed me. But from day one, it's great when you're coming into, I guess, a sporting team environment, especially, and boarding as a community as well, because you straight away have, all these friends and mates around you who, you've got similar interests with and, commonalities. So there was definitely, I guess, a bit of nerves with the move, but from day one, I felt super comfortable and just thrived.
I love it. Now, obviously, it's a very rich rugby school. You played in the first 15 for 2 seasons, and you experienced extreme heartbreak and extreme euphoria. Do you want to just tell listeners that are familiar and maybe those that aren't with your 2 seasons in the first 15?
Yeah, so my first year was 2016. So we had a pretty strong team that year as well, and I think from memory it was maybe round 7 we came up against Brisbane State High, which had a pretty established team too. The likes of Murray Talongi, who's gone on and played for the Cowboys in Queensland, Jordan Pataya, who has played for the Wallabies, along with like a host of other players who I think have, played a little bit of Super Rugby in different, levels. So they had a good team, and we came face to face with them at Ross Oval. I believe it was round 7, and the way the draw had worked out and the point system had worked out, the winner of that game was going to win the premiership. So they ended up scoring on the full-time buzzer to win the game.
Oh.
So. We lost on the buzzer, and that was obviously heartbreaking. It was tough, and we went back, and I think we got a good win the following week, but it was too late. So, that was really
That's
tough.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah,
Isn't
it
it
was. It was.
I mean, it's
tough.
not the end of the world, but when you're training for any sport, you know that in those moments you want to convert.
Yeah, it was tough. It was definitely tough, but. Then I guess flip the script to next year, and we had a buzzer beater win against Gregory Terrace in round 1, which I think some people might be familiar with. That was where there was a re-kick, so we've gone to kick the goal, and apparently they've shouted, and there was a re-kick, and then Ray Jean, who was our fly half, has kicked it to win the game, and I think about 10,000 people ran on the field, and it was unreal.
And again. You're yelling. Back you go. You cannot yell and scream. Charging down. No charge down.
It was
giving
great.
me goosebumps just listening to it.
And then we went on to win the premiership, a tied premiership, I should mention, in the spirit of honesty. We won in that 2017 year, which was my senior year.
I love that. Now, what a lot of people might not necessarily know about your senior year is that, yes, rugby was a big part of it, but also so is academics. Mm-hmm. My understanding is you were almost ducks of the college. You came out with an OP1, which is phenomenal for a forward and you don't think of forwards in rugby as being, OP1 potential.
Yeah.
But tell me a little bit about your approach to your academic life as well.
Yeah. Well, again, I think it goes back to firstly, my parents and, dad in particular. It was always, he knew what I was capable of. And if he thought I wasn't aiming up to that, it was always very clear that football would be taken off the cards.
Oh, there you go. Parents, there's the answer.
Yeah.
If your kids aren't, doing their homework, threaten to take football and sport off the table.
And I think, it might sound a little harsh, but it definitely was a good motivator. And then I got to a point where I think I was old enough and I valued it enough that he didn't really need to give me those, those pushes along the way. But yeah, I think I was passionate about my schooling, and I've always enjoyed learning and that side of things. And I think also I'm a pretty competitive person, so I don't like losing anything. And when I do something, I tend to want to try to be the best at it. So sometimes I don't quite make it. Like, it's quite funny. Like, as you mentioned, I didn't quite hit the ducks. I think I fell one short, and I still remember, Will Hughes was the guy who beat me. He was a good friend of mine. He's a good guy. I think he's gone on and studied mathematics and everything. So he was a very intelligent guy. But we did all the same subjects, and I think he beat me in just about everyone. So
let's not brush over that.
I haven't let it go.
Let's talk about your subject list in grade 11 and 12.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah, I do. So I did Maths B, Maths C. Sorry, it's a bit different now, I understand, with ATAR, the introduction. But I was Maths B, Maths C, physics, chemistry, study of religion, and English. It was they were tough, but I actually would say I enjoyed them as much as you can enjoy physics. So I think for me, I wanted to study those subjects. I knew I wanted to, try to go to university. I didn't know quite what I wanted to do at the time, but I knew that they would, try to lay a good platform for where I wanted to go.
No, I love it. Congratulations on that. Going back to leaving the school, talk to me about your transition from rugby league, then going into a rugby union community like Nudgee, and then making your move into professional rugby league. What was that path like for you, and how did it bring you to the Manly Sea Eagles?
Yeah, so it was an interesting one because I was contracted to the Brisbane Broncos at quite a young age, and in their talent squads from an even younger age. So I first started training under their banner as such at 13, and that was before I was even at Nudgee. So when Nudgee came about, we kind of reached out to Broncos and said, this is, I guess, what's happened. And then we all kind of almost sat together and worked out, I guess, a way we could make it happen. It ended up working really well, right? Because for someone like me who's from a regional town, the previous arrangement was I would fly down to Brisbane 4 times a year and go and do, development sessions with the Broncos, and that was the only time they would see me. Whereas when I came down to Nudgee, the agreement was, I was able to go over to Red Hill, over to their training centre and do monthly sessions. So for them, they got, more access, a lot more time with me to develop me. And they also knew that I was going to, a good school that would help develop me into, I guess, a good person and, get a good education and all these other things that I think are super important. I guess not just in life, but also in professional sports. So it really ended up being a win-win. And I guess it was just a little bit of a balancing act sometimes as to, what took preference on a given weekend, whether it be league or union. But the whole process honestly went really well, really smoothly. And I think since then, other boys have done similar things through the college with, NRL clubs.
Yeah, definitely. I remember in my time in the 90s and even 2000, there were some amazing rugby league players that also played rugby at Nudgee, and a lot of them went on to have great league careers afterwards. So amazing. Tell me, what's it like, the Manly Sea Eagles? I've got to be honest, I grew up in Brisbane. I used to hate the Manly Sea Eagles as a kid. My God, I of all the teams. But, I think, I know they're an amazing organisation. It's a great part of the world. But tell me a little bit about what it's been like for you over the last 4 seasons playing with such a, historic club.
Yeah, so it was definitely an interesting move when it came about. They, the way things work these days is they just reached out to my management as such. Like at the time I was, been a little bit in and out of the Broncos. My manager probably knew I wasn't, super happy, was kind of needing a bit of a change. And it came about that they were keen to bring me down, give an opportunity. And then I had to think about it, and it kind of felt right. Like there was definitely a fair bit of appeal to the club. I mean, at the time they just made a prelim final. I think they finished top 4.
Yep.
The likes of the Trebojeviches and Daly, some great players, some people that really felt like I wanted to go and play with, and a system and a club that I felt like I could be happy under. And it's funny the way you mentioned everyone hates Manly, and I think that stems back to the 70s. I think, obviously I was not even thought of, but from what I've heard, I think in the 70s they basically bought all the best players because they had a lot of cash. And they won about 4 or 5 comps or something in the 70s. So I think, that's where the Silvertails and the hatred of Manly stems from.
Well, look, full transparency, I live, right next door to Manly.
Yeah.
I drive past that oval all the time.
Yep.
I've been to Brookvale a couple of times. What's it like playing there at the Brookvale Oval?
It's exceptional. I've, been fortunate enough to play in some great atmospheres and some great stadiums. Las Vegas, Ross Oval. So it's been great. But look, Brooky's such a special place. I think when we're full, we get about 19,000 people there, but they're hanging from the rafters. The hill, it's got that old suburban grand feel to it. Like, everyone's just
tribal.
super passionate. It's tribal, and we love playing there. Like our fans get behind us. We generally play pretty good when we're at home, and
you feel super close to the game too.
You do.
When you're standing behind the goalpost, you can almost touch the players.
For me, I think you'd rather play at some of those suburban grounds that feel full as opposed to playing in a core stadium which might sit 80, but they only have 20 odd in there. So I really like the feel. Honestly, it does feel a bit like a Ross Oval or something where you've got the grandstand and the hill, and everyone's right there.
Some of your inspirations. Who are you inspired by in rugby league? Who do you look up to in your team or others?
Yeah, okay. Well, I think for me, it definitely one that strikes a chord is Darren Lockyer when I was a kid. Queenslander.
What a legend.
I grew up a Broncos fan. He was at the absolute peak of his powers when I was kind of developing my love for footy. So, fortunate enough to have met Lockyer a few times since then, and that was awesome. And then in our team currently, being a Queenslander as well, I'm going to have to say Daly, Cherry Evans. Like, he's just a legend, always so positive, trains so hard. He's, the fittest person in the team. He, sets a standard.
Is that right?
Has time for everyone. I think, he's a really good human. And I think also if you look at what he's done, won competitions, captain his state, 20-plus origins, 300-plus games. I think he's almost at 350. I definitely look up to him.
Is he the sort of guy that'll take time to have a word with you one-on-one? Or
definitely.
Okay.
I think everyone in the team would attest to this too. He's a type of captain, and he's our captain obviously, which is great, but he's a type of guy who will go, and sit himself on the bus next to, maybe the young guy or maybe the guy who hasn't even played first grade yet, who's just a squad member, and, take the time to, ask him about his family or learn something about him. In some ways, I'm honestly a bit jealous of his character in that respect. Like, he's so giving with his time and so genuinely, interested in learning things about people. Like, he really sets a high bar, I think, as a human being.
That's awesome. And look, to be honest, getting to know you a little bit, you could do the same thing.
Yeah.
I can see it. You're the sort of person who could sit next to the young guy on the bus, strike up a conversation, and on that drive from Brookvale to Sydney Airport, probably inspire the next generation as well. So I think it's pretty special that you have that sort of those sort of characters around you. And I have no doubt that, you already are a leader in your community, but, you've got big things coming ahead.
Thank you.
What about for those that are listening who love their rugby league? They know Nudgee's sort of rugby community. There are a couple of other Nudgee Old Boys playing in the NRL.
Yep.
And some that you faced off against.
Yep.
Oh, no, some you played with.
Yeah,
that you
played with
against.
and against, yeah. So there's a couple. So Daniel Atkinson is at Cronulla. He's moving to St. George Dragons.
And you guys played together?
Yeah, so he was he's a year younger than me at school. So he was year 11. He was our fullback butt in my senior year. So he was a part of that premiership team in 2017. He was a great player at school. And, since he had a bit of a roundabout journey to find his way to Cronulla, so he played some Q Cup for the Sunshine Coast Falcons in league. Subsequently went to Melbourne, where I think he made his NRL debut, I'm pretty sure. And then from there, he found his way to the Sharks, where he's actually really had a couple breakout years and really established himself. So I think big things will come from him in the future, and that is always exciting when I guess you see someone that you played with at school, then also go on and do well. And we've played each other already twice this year, so
love that.
Nice to see him. And then the other one obviously who's just burst onto the scene, Rob Toyer, who I was unfortunate enough not to get to play with because he looks like an absolute gun. But he's obviously burst onto the scene, played for Queensland now, and at the Roosters I think he's only 10 or 11 games into his NRL career, which is really phenomenal. So I actually haven't come up against him in the NRL yet, but that will happen in the next couple months. So looking forward to that.
He looks like a hard guy to tackle.
Yeah, he does. He does.
Okay, so that's your rugby league career. Now, I want to talk also about life out off the field.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about your academics and you went to university where you've done your degree. But what people might not know is you're also amongst a busy football career, which I'm sure is extremely busy in season. During season and off season, you're also working in finance.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about what you're trying to achieve there and what the plan is.
Yeah, so I guess for me, when I graduated school, obviously you have to put your preferences into university. And to be honest, as a bit of a guess, I actually just went finance and economics and ended up really liking it. And then, after probably about a year of study, I started exploring, I guess, different work experience arrangements and so forth. And, I had a bit of a passion in that area and really started enjoying it. So when I moved down to Sydney, I obviously knowing Sydney as, I suppose, the finance capital of Australia, that's where I guess the majority of institutions do their primary business. Just went looking, I suppose, for an opportunity where I could establish something a little bit more regimented and, structured, where I could actually go in and consistently, whether it be a day a week or in whatever form, and learn and I guess, meet people, develop myself. And I was fortunate enough to be introduced to Phil King, who founded Regal Funds Management, which has now become Regal Partners. So they're an alternatives investment manager in Sydney. And they've just been great. So been there 3 years now, working in equity analysis, doing a little bit on the marketing side of things and distribution side, sales. They've just been tremendous for my development. So on a day off, so if we have a Tuesday or Wednesday off through the week, I'll, keep the team at Regal updated as to what my, schedule is. I'll send them out, look, invites, say, okay, this is my work day for the week. And then I'll come in and, help the team out where I can. So that can vary what that looks like, but, often just assisting portfolio managers or other analysts with little projects, working through a particular stock or a company, potential investment. And, just trying to form a view on that.
I love it. It's so inspiring to hear. In fact, we're talking to another Nudgee Old Boy, Dr. Mark Elone, in this same podcast series. And he's one of those few people that have had outstanding careers where they've represented the Wallabies and then gone on to have, to be a world famous ophthalmologist. And to excel in not just one career, but in two careers is such a rarity. So I love the fact that you're thinking beyond just representing yourself and your club and your family in professional football, but you're also thinking about that next career step after it.
It's something like I actually speak about a little bit because I'm quite passionate about this topic, but I truly believe there's a lot of commonalities between, I guess, like any, you could argue, like elite standard of work. Like a lot of these guys that I go into the office and work with have so many similarities to some of the guys I train with. And you hear that at face value and think, how's that make sense? What would a bunch of hedge fund analysts and portfolio managers have to do with, a bunch of footy players who you'd picture these big burly guys or whatever. But it's just like that regimented, structured, routine-driven people who I guess, they are quite similar. Like some of the guys in office, they're always up early, they're training, they're super dialed into their health and their fitness and, finding ways to be at their peak, personal development. So it's quite funny, but I do actually see a lot of similarities from, I guess, profession to profession.
Yeah, I agree. I'm all about structure. I love structure and regiment, or being regimented. And I agree. I think across a lot of industries, having that sort of structure, and you got to be driven. But I think it translates across sport, professional world. Hey, I ran a fun question for you. I want to have, I'm trying to marry here your two worlds, sport and you're working at this hedge fund and looking at economics and investment. Okay, hypothetically, if you were to buy an Australian Rugby League team, buy it, purchase it, which team would you buy and why? If you're looking for a 10-year return.
10-year return. Well, I may be wrong with information. I think Brisbane Broncos might be up there with the most profitable. So that would be one. But I suppose also, obviously, my heart's at Manly at the moment. So I'd like to think maybe I'd buy Manly and, invest, get the place absolutely ticking and try to cash out.
There's the scoop. Ethan Bullemor to own the Manly Sea Eagles. Watch this space.
Yeah.
Thanks for indulging us with that.
Nice.
We've got a student question coming up. I just want to ask you one more thing. What's your connection like to the school today in terms of friends? Do you still keep in touch?
Yep.
With friends from the school, and what's that connection like and mean for you?
It is. Yeah, definitely still keep in touch with boys I boarded with, boys I went to school with. It's funny. Obviously, everyone ends up quite scattered across the place. I was just caught up with one of the teachers whose son I went to school with, and they're living in Portugal now. I've got friends in Townsville. I've got friends in the Sunshine Coast. I've got friends in Brisbane, some in Sydney, and still keep in touch. And obviously everyone is leading busy lives, and sometimes it might be whether it's months or years in between seeing people or talking to people. But I think the one thing that I've definitely noticed since leaving Nudgee is that connection stays strong. And, when you do come across each other again, whether it be, bumping into someone, in town or at a restaurant or over social media, it's just generally strikes up like you've never been apart, and really, really cherish those connections.
I love that. And for those listening, something that happened off air earlier is where we're obviously doing this interview here on the campus, but Ethan came in early this morning, met with the first 15 coach, met with the first 15 team. So even the fact that you're giving yourself back to the college in those sorts of ways that don't end up in the paper or don't end up on, or not meant to end up on podcasts, I think is a real testament to yourself.
No, thank you.
So this season, like I said, we've got students at the college that have want to ask questions of their heroes, and we've got two students that look up to you that want to ask you some hard-hitting questions. Let's throw to our first question and take a look.
Hey Ethan, my name's Toby. I'm a Year 6 student at Nudgee College. How did you juggle doing your homework and playing footy all the time?
It's a great question, young Toby. Well, for me, I was probably also fortunate being a boarder, right, that we just got made to study. So we had set study hours. So I was very lucky. Like, I think that actually laid the platform for why I'm a routine person now. But for me, it was just about, we'd have our study hours in boarding, and I'd sit down and I would, when I'm there and I'm in study, I'd attack that fully. And then, your footy training hours outside of that. So I think that the lesson there as well is like translates into life after that. It's just by allocating your time and, splitting up, what's when, and when you're in that moment at the one given activity, give your all to that, and then you move on to the next.
No, I agree. I remember I was a swimmer, right? So we'd swim 2 hours in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. And I always remember in class, I just wanted to get as much done in class so I didn't have to do the homework later.
I did that trick as well, actually. I was quite similar.
All right. Great advice. We've got a second question from a student. Let's go there now.
Hey Ethan, my name is Jack and I'm a Year 6 student at Nudgee College. How do you think your academic discipline has influenced your approach to professional rugby?
The grade 6s with the questions today.
I know. Very well articulated that. I think, first of all, I think discipline obviously transcends just academics, right? So I think discipline itself is, a mindset. So that definitely applies to my academics, which then applies to, your football, your sport, your diet, your lifestyle, all those things I think flow on. One thing I probably would say in terms of academics in particular is there's still like a lot of learning in any profession, and, in rugby league as well. So we do a lot of video, we do a lot of, team analysis, we get a lot of stats. Like, gone are the days of just, running out and, throwing the ball around or doing your best. So I think, in some ways that, I guess, academic background and that, discipline of, that I had at school can help with, I suppose, interpreting some of that stuff and, being diligent with that, I suppose, analytical side of the game.
I love it. 2 questions for you to finish up. One's a hypothetical. It's the grand final, 2025. Manly Sea Eagles are in the final. Who are you playing against and how much do you win by?
I'm going to say, Bulldogs look good this year. I think they're right up the top. I think their squad looks strong. How much did you say? How much?
How much does Manly win by?
16.
Yeah. All right. Sounds like a great final.
Yep.
All right. Now, I want to ask you one piece of advice that you would give for listeners in order to achieve their goals. What's that one piece of advice that you want to give listeners to achieve their goal? It doesn't have to be sport, could be career, could be any sort of approach to life. What's that one takeaway that you'd like to give listeners today?
Yeah, geez, it's a great question. I think just, whatever you want to do, just give it 100%. It sounds a little bit cliche, but, when something's in front of you, I think attack it fully. And if it doesn't turn out to be for you, well, you go on to the next thing and then attack that fully. But by, I suppose, giving you all to something, the worst case scenario is you eliminate one option off the board. For me, I've been fortunate where I've probably given a couple things a go and found, success and enjoyment in both of them. But I think by, just investing yourself entirely in what you do, then at least you're not going to have any regrets. You're not going to feel like you left any chips on the table. I think you'll find success as well.
I just want to look at, I've got this one note on my table here, and it's something you said when we talked off camera. You said that, someone could light the flame, but you have to keep it burning.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
Yeah, well, that goes back to like what I said about, I suppose, my parents and my upbringing. They obviously were pushing me from a young age, and they like, as I said in that quote, I suppose, they might light the flame, but you have to keep it burning. You have to keep pushing yourself, because no one's going to hold your hand every step of the way. In no career, no walk of life is someone going to just grab you by the hand and pull you up the ladder, right? So I really think, you've got to, keep driving yourself. And that's where I think lean on things like routine, structure, discipline, I guess why are you getting up and doing that? You have to be so sure of that, because that's what is going to, I guess, keep pushing you on the day where, you're a bit tired or you're a bit buggered, like it's, you've just had a big field session and then you've got to go to gym and, the strength coach has your weights that you're meant to hit and he says, you've got to hit this, and you're thinking, oh, maybe, will it really hurt if I just drop 10, 20 kilos off that? But I think it's that mindset of going like, hang on, no, like I'm going to do that because, that's what I'm made of and that's what my mentality is. And, we're not going to take a shortcut here. So I think, finding that internal drive and really just, having that fire in you and then, nurturing that fire through your discipline, your routine, those things.
Well, Ethan, I'm sure you're going to inspire so many Nudgee students. I'm sure the Nudgee community who are listening that know you or are getting to know you have enjoyed hearing your story. So thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, and we're excited to continue to follow your career on and off the field.
Thank you very much. And once again, thank you to Nudgee.
Thanks, buddy.
What a treat to sit down with Ethan Bullemor, such an incredible and inspirational leader, an amazing career in rugby league, in academics, and also in his own professional career. Well, if you enjoyed that, stick around because next time we have an absolute treat. We're sitting down with 2021 Old Boy Alex Clark, who's going to share his emotional story and also share his continued road to recovery.
That hopefully one day I will be able to walk, and I know there's like later in the future that people will be doing research and stuff about helping other, not just me but other people with spinal cord injuries like to walk again. So I know they are doing that as well, researching for that.
If you loved this episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your mates. Unscripted, my Nudgee hero. It's all about us, past, present, and future.